So for more insight into the emerging nuclear deal and its implications, we welcome to studio Dr. Micheal Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the US and former deputy Israeli minister and parliament member, and Nadav Tamir, executive director of J Street Israel and a former Israeli diplomat, political officer in the Embassy of Israel in the US, and senior advisor for governmental and international affairs at the Perez Center for Peace. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here on this very important topic. So there is much at stake here, as we all know. Yair Lapid is set to speak to the US President Joe Biden sometime today. Ambassador, I'm going to start with you. Yair Lapid says it's a bad deal. What does he need to be saying to the US President?
He's going to say to them, I hope. It's a bad deal. It's a bad deal because the Iranian nuclear program has three components. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile delivery system, it's a warhead program, and it's an enrichment program. The deal delays the enrichment program probably for about as much as 2 years, and in return pays Iran hundreds of billions of dollars, which is going to be bad for the state of Israel because we all know that Iran's not going to use that money to build schools and hospitals. It's all going to go to Hezbollah and to Islamic Jihad. Okay, what I hope that the Prime Minister will say to the President, we understand you have interests, you don't have a military option, America's far from the Middle East, you're not threatened by national annihilation by the Iranians. We understand that our interests aren't exactly confluent here. What can you do in the wake of this bad agreement to reinforce Israel's security? Can you give us, first of all, understandings? What will happen if Iran breaks out? If Israel has to act alone, will you be with us? And secondly, will you give us capabilities? Because believe it or not, America has military capabilities that Israel does not have, and that we have asked for, that I have asked for, and have not received. It's about time we got them.
Nadav, your thoughts on this deal as it exists right now?
Well, the deal is not perfect, but it's much better than all the alternative, which is the most important criteria in foreign policy. You take the best alternative that you have. It's very rare in international affairs that you actually have a case study, a live case study, and we saw what happened when Trump withdrew from the deal. Iran is 10 times more enriched uranium, much closer to a bomb. It was a huge mistake because Iran, by all the intelligence forces, by the IAEA, was actually, working according to the agreement until the Americans left the agreement. So I agree with Ambassador Oren that Israel should speak to the US about what to do after the agreement, of course, and what kind of security arrangements we could have with the Americans. But to fight against the Americans and to say that it's a bad deal is a mistake. It's a mistake that is bad for the US-Israel relations, for the Israeli relations with the Democratic Party that were trashed through the Netanyahu times, and I don't think Lapid should repeat those mistakes. And it's not true. It's not true even according to most of the security people in Israel, in the IDF and outside of the IDF.
Well, that's emphatically untrue. Yeah, there are certain people in former members of the security establishment who have come out and said it's not a good deal, but it's better than no deal. No one says it's a good deal. Just delays the inevitable. That Iran is going to someday have threshold capacity, the ability to make a bomb. It's whether it has it now or in 2 or 3 years, and how much money it gets in the interim, and how much it can develop missiles, and how much it can develop other capabilities like a warhead in the interim. That's a bad deal. What's emphatically untrue is that Israel has to say it's a bad deal. Why does Israel have to say the bad deal? Because we're going to have to operate against it. We're going to have to operate against it in secret ways and in not so secret ways. And if we say it's a good deal, then why are we fighting it? So it's extremely important for the Prime Minister of Israel, and it doesn't matter which party, left, right, up, or down, has to say it's a bad deal in order to give us legitimacy to fight against and defend ourselves against Iran.
Israel should not fight against the agreement. Israel should deal with Iran in different ways.
What are those?
But how do you do that if you say it's a good deal, Nadav?
We should do it with the Americans because the deal doesn't say that you cannot deal with the other issues that Iran is doing.
Including the nuclear program. How do we strike at the nuclear program?
Israel cannot strike the nuclear program.
We strike at the nuclear program quite a bit, and you know it.
Well, it's a totally different situation than what we had in Iraq and Syria, and you know it. The Iranian,
no, I don't mean by the air. We strike by different ways. You know we strike by. You were there.
The Iranian program is so much bigger, and Israel cannot, on its own, destroy the Iranian program.
So what should
the only
Israel
player
be doing?
that can do it is the Americans. So Israel should be in close touch with the Americans to see how we could still maintain intimacy and harmony between us and the Americans and the other P5+1 countries, to make sure that we share intelligence with them. We make sure that we cooperate in dealing with other aspects of the Iranian program that was mentioned, because it's not just the nuclear, it's also what Iran is doing in the region in terms of using proxies, in terms of...
What about the money that's going to end up going to those proxies?
I'm sorry?
What about the money that could end up going to those proxies? Leaders in Israel have voiced concerns, saying that the funding is going to end up helping Hezbollah, helping Hamas, helping people that want to threaten Israel's security.
Well, it's a spin, because we saw what happened when Trump used the maximum pressure. It didn't change a bit the way the Iranian works, because the money that Iran, the IRGC, still get is not dependent on those sanctions. I mean, they, and especially not when the prices of oil are so high. So Iran can still support those proxies, whether with this new money or without it. And the question is, what is the international community doing about this?
And which is nothing. Exactly nothing.
And
that's not true.
This is what Israel could do by working with the Americans,
simply untrue.
Operationally and through sharing intelligence, instead of fighting administration that doesn't work. And Israel is not strong enough to deal with the Iranian program on its own. And we know it, and we're selling illusions to the Israeli people.
I don't believe that, but let's leave our capabilities alone. That's not for this discussion. We know that Iran received tens of billions of dollars under the 2015 JCPOA. We know exactly where the money went. We know where the money's going. They'll starve their own people in order to give rockets to Hezbollah. There were protests in Tehran. You know, no money for Tehran, no money for Palestine, money for us. It's not true. One of the things we have to discuss with the United States is America quietly supporting us, not condemning us in any way, in the ways that we will continue to act against Iran, including against the Iran nuclear program, whether against the people who operate the program, whether against its facilities, or whether against its supply lines. I'm going to sound Churchillian here. We're going to fight it in the air and the ground. And we'd like the United States to support us and not object to it, not issue quiet condemnations, understand. And that's one of the many understandings we can reach with the administration after this.
To say that we're fighting against the most important national security priority of the president, and then to say that we need to coordinate with the Americans. So we should coordinate with the Americans. We should help the Americans in terms of our capabilities, intelligence and otherwise. But to fight against the agreement is a huge mistake, and we saw what happened when Netanyahu did it. We saw what happened when it completely trashed the bipartisan approach that Israel always had with America. We saw what happened when we pressed Trump to withdraw from the agreement, which completely trashed the international force that was there against Iran. And instead of isolating Iran, we isolated Israel. So let's not repeat those mistakes.
I don't see Israel that more isolated than we were before. But let's leave politics out of this, okay? The fact is, I had criticism about Netanyahu's treatment dealing with the issue. I have criticism about the current government's treatment. At the end of the day, the outcome is exactly the same. Because it's about American interests. And American interests, as I said earlier, are not confluent with ours. They don't have a military option. The minute there's no military option, then there's got to be a negotiated solution. And the Iranians they're very, very good negotiators. They're going to get a very good deal. The question is, where does that leave us? And whether the United States will support our ability to defend ourselves. Because, believe me, we're going to have to defend ourselves. We are en route to a regional conflict, not a local conflict, but will involve Hezbollah, will involve Shiite militias in Iraq, will involve the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and, of course, everybody in Gaza. And that's going to be tremendous. We're going to need tremendous amount of logistical support and diplomatic support.
No doubt that we need support, and that's why we are in J Street supporting the security assistance for Israel, but it will be a huge mistake to go against the agreement. The agreement actually is pushing back the ability of Iran to achieve a bomb, not only in terms of enriched uranium, also in terms of the monitoring and the ability of the international community to be in Iran and to check what Iran is doing. It will be a huge mistake to fight it. The agreement will happen if the Iranian and the P5+1 will agree on the terms. We should be in the room and not outside of the room, which is what we did, what happened when we fought the agreement back then.
If the deal isn't signed, there's a lot of insults going back and forth, stagnation. If there isn't an emerging deal right now, what does that mean for Israel?
It means what the same thing would mean for Israel 2 years from now. The question is, do we act now or do we act then? And we'll be in a better position then than we are now. That's the whole debate going on among certain security officials. They say, wait, we need another 2 or 3 years to develop the ability to deal with Iran's nuclear program. What does that mean, deal with? It doesn't mean, like, be nice to it. It means destroy it. And the question is whether we'll be in a better situation now or in 3 years from now. We may have to make that decision earlier.
Benny Gantz, the defense minister, touched down in Tampa just a short while ago. He's meeting at CENTCOM. He's also meeting with other national security advisors. Talk to us. You say things are happening behind the scenes, the kind of noise that needs to be made. What message should he be giving behind the scenes right now, not what's happening at the podiums at press conferences?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that there is a big difference between political posturing. The Iranians, the Americans, the Israelis are all doing politics. And what Gantz should do, which I believe he's doing already, is to try to work very close with the Americans to think how we could cooperate, as I said, both in terms of intelligence and operationally, to make sure that that Iran doesn't get a nuclear bomb. And by the way, the Iranians for 30 years everybody is talking that they're going to have a bomb next year. It's not happening, and I'm not sure the Iranians want to get a bomb, but it's clearly important that the international community will be there and make sure that they can do it.
20 seconds, Ambassador, parting shot. How do you see this unfolding now?
I hope, again, that if the deal is signed, that the United States will enter into an intimate dialogue with us about understandings and capabilities that the United States can give us in order to better enable us to defend ourselves, and will cease criticizing the actions that we do take to defend ourselves.
Dr. Micheal Oren and Nadav Tamir, thank you so much. We've got lots more to discuss.